Okay, welcome. This is number 7 in my series of the 12 Days of Christmas. And it's a series I've done. You can look at each one of them, and I give you a um, correlation to each one of the 12, with the zodiacal thing and the 12 disciples. And I go on 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5. And we're on 5. And everybody that knows and ever sings the song knows that, well, that's the time of 5 golden rings. And indeed, many of the pictures here show the 5 golden rings. And you wonder what the 5 golden rings are about. So I'll start with that. And then I'll start with the reveal. Because my version of the 5 golden rings is a little different. Mine is 5 bullshit things. And I'll show you 5 bullshit things in the Bible that have to go along with this. And first, I think I'll show you the 5 rings in reality. There's 2 things you can get out of it, but here's one. That you can get this symbol out of the way that this moon looks during its crescents going throughout the year. And a new and an old and new and an old and a new and old. And you've gone through that many things, and therefore there's your 5 golden rings that you've gone through. It's basically the year-end festival, and it was done during Saturnalia. And Saturnalia is the Christmas festival that we go with today, but really Saturnalia, just like most of the Greek and Roman stuff, actually takes in everyone else's religions and their festivals and things about them. So they're more accepted, I guess, and or they're more accepting, apparently, than anyone else back in the olden times. Many of their gods come from different places, such as like Kronos, the Phoenician, and the Persian god Dionysus, and so on. So, of course, they got Bacchus. So they make their own versions of things too, and just off stories and aspects, they can take one deity and make a few deities out of it. And so let's take a little look at that story here, now that we're on 5 bullshit things, and I'll give you a little reveal here. So you look at old people's writing, ancient writings and things, old historians, and where we really get our best stuff that's left because the Library of Alexandria got destroyed long ago, are people that knew and used to experience the Library of Alexandria themselves and the writings that they had. And we only have a few of them. And oddly, every single one of them also is attached to Christianity, which shows you something strange. But we'll get into that here shortly. Eusebius ends up writing a lot, quite a bit. Most people just love his oratory, but what they don't usually look at is some of his other things where they talk about um, different cultures other than the Christian thing. They're just like, oh, okay, so here's stuff about Kronos, and here's stuff about Saturn, here's stuff about this or that. And they're just going, they're like, God, look at those pagans. It's kind of funny whenever we look back at it, if you're a historian too, because you actually see that they sucked in all this stuff that we're talking about, in fact, of having an altar in the first place and all of the religion thing that they do and stuff. It seems like you get sucked into all of it and then turn it into their own, really, towards the end of it here. But what we're going to do is show you something that it's kind of interesting. It was a custom. I'm reading right here. I don't know if you can get it. It was a custom of the ancients in great crises of danger for the rulers of a city or nation, in order to avert the common ruin, to give up the most beloved of their children for sacrifice as a ransom to avenging demons. And those who were thus given up were sacrificed with mystic rites. Now let me explain that to you. Like even in the Bible, it talks about Jesus finds sick people. And those sick people have a demon in them. They don't have a bacterial infection that something's going to help. And fever is a a demon inside you. They're from hell because it makes you warm, you see. So this is to help avert whenever people started getting real sick, they would actually take and kill one of their kids. And it sounds stupid as hell to people nowadays. It really does. But it actually used to happen. People, you hear stories about people used to sacrifice their kids to the rain gods and stuff. And of course, you know that used to happen in South America, where they would cut the hearts out of people while they were alive, trying to get it to rain for them while the area became ruined. Right? So you're well aware of it happening. You just don't want it to be attached to your religion in any way, shape, or form. But let me show you something here. So you see this writing about Cronus in his History of the Jews. Further writes about Cronus. So he's talking about Cronus and everything. And he tells you about Thoth, or Thoth, or thought, which is thoughts. Tatus, whom the Egyptians call Thoth, excelled in wisdom among the Phoenicians. So he was a Phoenician. And the Phoenicians were given that name because they were the ceremonial phoenix that had risen from the ashes. It's believed that they had, in primordial times, landed on that shore after the great flood and a great destruction, perhaps even the giant Minoan crater created by Santorini exploding back in the day. Who knows? But it's definitely a person, okay? And he was the first to rescue the worship of gods from the ignorance of the vulgar and arrange it in order of the intelligence experience. Many generations after him, a god Sormebelos and Thoro. So he tries to throw in Thor and Bel, which is Baal, right? Whose name was changed to Isarthis, brought the light of theology to Tatus, which had been hidden and overshadowed by allegories. So they just had a bunch of, I guess you're saying, idol worship, and things, and that they had kind of forgotten it. And no reason why, because the the Greeks and Romans had taken all the truth of the story and turned them into fanciful little tales that you might be able to tell in mixed public and around children, and really didn't go into the gore of the straightforward as a history type thing. They weren't trying to be really historians, and it's amazing with their stories that they had that they actually kept the history that we have today. And whenever I started looking back at this, the one that you really could discount is going to be Greeks and Romans, even though they put their gods together, because of all the BS stories. And Zeus and everybody, they'll screw a tree and make it, and make nymphs and all that, and it's just crazy, fanciful stories, and flying horses and all kinds of crazy stuff. And then whenever you get off into it with the other characters and other cultures, you come to find out a lot of it is zodiacal, and you look back at theirs, and it was too. And that the silly little stories went along with the ability to point at the zodiac at night and go around and around with Pegasus and all of the little zodiacs that are there and kind of give little stories. And you could tell people stories, and then they would, because there's a picture for them to remember it by in front of their eyes, they would remember it. And this is apparently a way of doing it that they used to do all the way back. The ancient Sumerians, which predate this, and anything that these guys talk about, they talk about the Egyptians, but now we know that the ancient Sumerians go back before that with their cuneiform, at least 1600 years before that. And then they're talking about times whenever that shows up, they have a lot of history behind that, about 3,000 or 4,000 more years of history, and it fades there. And may even be, because they talk in their tablets of the Lords of Arata, it may be the Arata civilization that ended up putting out the Stonehenge things that you have out there. So, as part of our 5, I just want to show you something here that I'm going to give up. So you have to do this, you have to do the child sacrifice against human demons that are coming, and you sacrifice them with mystic rites. Sometimes after this, because these were people that helped save everybody, they deified them. And indeed, when you look at all these old ancient cultures, they deify a guy that did something special for the culture for it to continue, and then later he becomes a god and he gets a star in heaven. And indeed, that happens in Christianity. You don't think so, but old Christian doctrine used to say that if you were a good enough, and faithful enough person, you'd get a star in heaven. Twinkle, twinkle, little star. So, anyhow, Chronos, then, whom the Phoenicians call Elis. Okay, let's clarify that. Us. They put us and on and things like that on the end of people's names to make you know that they're deified. So they have Cronus, but it's really Cron, right? And they have Saturnus, but it's Saturn. So this is how they get that out of there. And Elis is really L, just E-L, L, okay? And L gets known all the way through that area in the Levant, which that is a French word, isn't it? So the Greeks and all of that gets known through that area, carried on, and it gets carried on to be named for things that go all the way through history, even to the point of us knowing about electricity is named after El, because his son Baal was the storm god, right? And El's son Baal is just like Saturn and Kronos' son Zeus. And if you remember the story, he ate all of his kids except for one. And this goes back to Kronos and Elis, who was a king of the country. That's all he was, a man. Subsequently, after his decease, was deified as the star Saturn. Okay, you're following me. Had a nymph of the country named Annabret and an only begotten son. So by her, he had an only begotten son. Doesn't that sound familiar? And people are going to be worshiping this thing and this common and only begotten son, who they on this count called Eudid. Eudid, the only begotten, being still so called among the Phoenicians. So if a Phoenician has only one kid, they call him a Eudid. It's a nickname for your first, and if you have an only child, it is called Eudid. And when very great dangers from war beset the country, he arrayed his son in royal apparel, prepared an altar, and sacrificed him. Due to this custom in great times of danger. And you wonder why this happened, people, and what it was that if you had a kid to pass on your heritage, he was going to try to avenge you as he grew up. And because they already knew this isn't like the beginning of time. Greeks put it as the beginning of time. They know damn well it's not the beginning of time. You do too whenever you're looking at these stories, because you know there's people everywhere and starting to have wars, and how could they just poof? Yeah, it just doesn't happen. Just like whenever you get through Noah's Ark and shortly later everybody's fighting with hundreds of thousands of people and you don't have enough offspring to do it, and they really are going to be second cousins of each other at best, and it's just disgusting to think that that's the way that it goes, that you're supposed to fight amongst your own family. But that's what that stupid book tells you. But so let's talk more about that book. So it's deified as Saturn, right? And during the time of great dangers, they sacrificed his kid, okay? And so then there's the reason that they had him deified, that they show you right here. And again, we see the same author in his translation from St. Cuathon about Phoenician alphabet, saying concerning the reptiles and venomous beasts which contribute to no good service to mankind, but do death and destruction to any whom they inject their incurable and fatal poison. This he also describes, saying as follows. So in the Bible, you've got you've got to crush the head on the snake. It's going to bite your feet. You've got to crush the head of the snake. It tells you in the Garden of Eden. Well, check out how you get this out of this. He tells you, the nature then of dragons and serpents, Thothus tells himself regarded as divine, and so again after him did the Phoenicians and Egyptians. Now, Thoth has that caduceus with the two serpents onto it, and it looks like DNA. For this animal was declared to him to be of all reptiles most full of breath, and fiery, and they hiss, in consequence of it, which also exerts an unsurpassable swiftness by means of its breath. So they thought that he would zoom because of the way he breathes. Okay, but anyhow, without feet or hands or any other external members, by which other animals or movements are like, it also exhibits forms of various shapes and in its progress makes spiral leaps as swift as it chooses. It is most long-lived, and its nature is put off by its old skin. Now, they used to think that the thing became immortal and he would get young again, but now they're telling you here to correct that. And so not only to grow young again, but also to assume a larger growth. And after it has fulfilled an appointed measure of age, it is self-consumed. And in like manner as Thoth himself has set to been done in the sacred books. So they still believe at this time that a snake will eat his own tail and disappear. That's what they believe happens, okay? But now let me go back to that other thing that I said twice in a row a minute ago and paused on. Eudid. Eudid. So they tell you in Sankunathon that he's talking about here that they named the land after his son. That when El had passed, as it says right here, after his decease, he's not a god, he dies, but they deify him as Saturn, right? And the Greeks and Romans call everybody down through here satyrs, satyrs. They have the little goat horns, and they still wear goat skins as pants and things. And if you read this whole thing, they talk about how they still are hunter-gatherers, and they have goat farmers and things. And so because of the wars, they kind of make fun of them and turn them into these goat-looking people. It's where they get the little idea. It's where we get our little idea. And because they're so bad in the Bible, it's where we get a Satan idea from. Now you take Saturn, and it's not far away from Satan, but let me make that equation for you a whole lot better with the Kevin Bacon 6 degrees thing. So El is the god of the Phoenicians, deified as Saturn. Okay? And Kronos also. He's the god of time and space, apparently. Right? And his name is El. And if you think that the Hebrews came out of the religion not worshiping anything out of the Canaanite area, then remarkably you haven't been listening or paying attention, and you haven't seen the big elephant that's been in front of you the whole time. Because in the Bible they worship in a place called a temple, which at first used to be a tent, so it was a temporary place to worship El, but a temple or a chapel. Right? And you wouldn't have that name, but they have the name Elohim. Elohim, it's the council of gods. And then, so let me see if I can find that for you here. But these same people have the name Elohim. And it talks about how they castrated himself, because what they did was they want to make it seem like you're not a threat to anymore. I'm not going to have any more offspring. And it's actually where the idea of circumcision comes from, that you've already been shown and you've already gone through the things. So if you're circumcised and then you do the things that are wrong, then you're in big trouble. But Elion, where is it? One of y'all is going to pause it here and be able to find it, but there's so much wording in here. It goes on and on and on and on. But Elion is the name of the God's council that's there. Trust me, it says it right up here. And he's the guy that built a round wall around a dwelling and founds the first city called Byblos in Phoenicia. Well, now archaeology knows that's wrong, that Babylon, Byblos, Babylon, is actually a Sumerian city, and the Sumerians had created it long before that. And these people only give credit to going back through Egyptian. They don't connect it with the Sumerians, but we find that Sumerians have the same ziggurats all over there also. And, Inanna and her stark pale white, red fiery hair and green eyes and lapis lazuli eyes of Enki and all those type of things lend to the idea of the Sumerians actually being the Aryans, and indeed India, right next to there, has this whole old story about Aryans and how they had come. So that seems to work in together real well. But so um, so they also tell you Cronus had a son named Sididus, and he killed him with his own sword, regarding with suspicion, because he thought that his son might rise up. His son was like, when dad died, supposedly the story goes, people, that he was like, when my dad dies, I'll become king and I'll become a great man over the land and do even better things. And he heard that and he thought, oh, he's going to rise up and try to kill me. And so he killed his son. And he did it to his daughter too. And then you find that the truth of the matter is that whenever they got trapped by these other people, that he actually ate all of his kids, and it outlasted the army during a time of drought around them, and the only one left was his son Bel, or Zeus. So, and they make all these connections here. Three sons, the same name, Zeus Belus, right? So they have this here, and they put it all together for you, and they put together Astarte, Asherah, Astarte, Zeus Demarius, Adonis, king of the gods, Adonis. They put all these names in there and they throw it all together for you. But let's go back to Eudid, because now I'm going to start popping off some of these, more of these five. I'm sure we've already gotten a couple on the list here. I haven't been counting them off one and two, but let's go for a huge one here. Eudid. You know, they don't have a J. Back then, they don't have a J. They don't have a J till around 1300 AD. That J doesn't exist. But they do have G, and G's not there. It's a Eudid. And whenever you see in the Bible, everybody knows that whenever it says Jesus, that it's actually Jesus or Yeshua. And they do it with a Y, and that's because of Latin saying I-E-U and sometimes Y, right? So it's really I-E or I-U. And his name here is I-E-D-U-D, Eudid. And they named the land after him. So they named the land Judea. And I wonder if you could find a place ever in history that would correlate and say that it was a land called Judea. And I can't find a Judea anywhere in history, but I find this famous one that has a J that doesn't exist, named Judea. And knowing that the J would be I-U, that ends up being Judea. Ding! So Judea is a Judea, and it's the land of El, and El's son, and always was. And that's exactly what it is. Yep. It's kind of odd, and I've got another video that I'm going to do about just this phrasing and this going along here, and they talk more about Zoroaster, snakes. You can pause this and look where they call it a good demon is a snake, and what demon, see, now here's the thing, a demon here is an angel to me. If I'm against you, your bad shit's a demon. Well, no, demon was good there. A demon is more like a symbol, a representative of something. It's not bad. It's only bad to people that are going against them. And you start talking shit about every single thing they've got. You know, and one way to prove that it wasn't bad is that Moses, you know, God himself causes snakes all over the people, and then Moses puts up a staff that's got the little symbol onto it. By the way, that symbol of a T that it has up there with the little symbol onto it would be exactly the symbol of Saturn. Yep. Ding! We're going to just call that 2 so far, so let's go and continue with this. L and his temple. How about the angels? Named Raphael, Ariel, Gabriel, Michael, but it's Michael, isn't it? Isn't it? People's names like crazy named El, Ishmael. Isn't that crazy? And every one of those names it says in the Bible are people's names where they mean something. And El is always the place where it's supposed to be God's name. And people 2,000 years later are wondering I wonder what Yahweh really means. Freaking hilarious, isn't it? But it gets worse. I mean, you think that the prophets could come and save everybody, but yet their names are something like Nathaniel. How about Daniel or Daniel? Yeah. Ezekiel. How about Elijah, which actually in Hebrew would be Eliyahu, which actually means El is Yahweh. Or Baaliah. Everyone knows about Baaliah, but that actually means Baal is Yahoo. Or Yahweh, actually. It's the same verbs. They don't have the adjective on the end, so there you go. In fact, let's look at something here real quick. Let's see if I can find Baal, Yahweh, Yahoo. So, what's funny about that is Yahweh and His, and I don't put in the rest of the letters, people. Look, it says Yahweh and His Asherah. What is that? Well, that's that in, and not, and a breath, and Shera. Yeah, so what is this? Well, believe it or not, they found inscriptions now. People kept digging, and they finally found things that have inscriptions on them, and sure enough, straightforward, in the ancient Canaanite dialect, it says Yahweh and His Asherah. Yahweh of Samaria and His Asherah. Right here. This is it. And golden calf called Yahweh. See Exodus 32:5. Golden calf. So why was he so pissed? I don't know. They just twisted the story up, didn't they? Because look, he's got flies all around him. You can see these flies and even the little movement like in a cartoon. And he's a bull god and damn well has horns. And there's his son and there's his wife, Yahweh and His Asherah. And who's this? That's his son Baal. No, El has a son. Yeah, whenever they kill off the Canaanites, they just steal the Sumerian god, this version, who actually has a fleur-de-lis on top of his head, showing you he's a Levant, the fleur-de-lis. We know where that, you can follow that back from before this time, from even the Sumerians, all the way into France, and keep it there. In fact, through colors and bonds and so on. In fact, you talk about colors and bonds. The colors of the Hebrews are blue and white. The colors of the Greeks are blue and white. Oh, by the way, this picture right here deserves like not even a ding, but a gong. But a ding. I think we're at 4 now. 3 or 4. Yeah, there's your 5 golden rings. We're eating them up real bad. So Baal, yeah. Well, let me see. Let me throw another one at you real quick. So they're Canaanite. The Canaanite worship of Baal is the origin of the word cannibalism. So they used to eat people. Ding! Oh man, it just gets deep. And the worst part about it, people, is I've tried real hard to figure it out. And no, the Hebrews are always worshiping this guy. They just take her clean off. They tell you that they're worshiping her throughout the Bible. And Baal worship and all that. It's just turned into funky stories. Where'd the funky stories come from? The Greeks. Yeah, the Greeks. They're the ones that wrote the Bible. They're the ones that, so you look at the Old Testament, and they've got everything working out to where it seems to work out for Saturn and everything, doesn't it? Isn't that great? Yeah. Well, the New Testament is actually Sol Invictus, and it's looked at as Mithra, the Persian god, who's a reborn guy on December 25th and everything, and they attach Jesus in and put that in. A ding! And just to make a real good chime into the last of the 5 days of Christmas, I guess. So you can see Yahweh had a wife. She holds her boobies out, everything. They just took the picture off of it. All they did was take the symbolism off of it. So you couldn't make fun of it. So you couldn't say that he was Lord of the Flies. So you couldn't say you worship cows or something silly at a later date. And it's the only reason it's lasted till now. If we knew hundreds, thousands of years ago, if we knew 2,000 years ago that it was just a bull god that was the exact same thing and stolen, wouldn't anybody in the world have gone for it? Would they have? No. And these people used to sacrifice their firstborn kids to it in hopes of rain and throw them into these Baal worshiping type things that look like this little epitaph over here, look like this, that they'd worship Baal to, you know? And oh, the satyrs and Satan. I was going to link that for the last one. So in Chaldea, he's known as Stir, and it's where we get Mr. from, and where we get the words mystery from. And a lot more too. I've got a page full of them over there, just like I got a page full of L's and other things that have eluded people for 2,000 years. But Saturn is a satyr, and he's a goat-looking guy, and you know damn good and well if we had a goat-looking guy what we would think that was, you know, what a satyr looks like. But let me show you what Baal worship looks like. So you tell me if you think this looks kind of like Satan worship here, because this is Baal worship, and what you had was Israel doing this at one time. The people in your Bible, they were taking and throwing their kids in these fire altars, and their sons and their daughters they sacrificed to the idols of Canaan. Look, she's like, oh, he's kind of pretty, we're going to burn him. You see this, right? So what does that remind you of? I'll give you a better look. That's Baal. Here's what El looked like. In fact, here's a blue and white Israelite priest worshiping El. And so, you know, today what we would think of, if you saw somebody doing something like this, what we would probably think that meant, right? You do see and get that idea, right? Makes you kind of wonder why anybody in the world would have ever gone after somebody who, even at one time and small in their period of time, they thought this was God. When you find out they stray repeatedly to this, it makes you really question whether you should believe anything they say. When you find out they stole it all and just changed it, and it's really a cow god that they took the picture of the cow thing off, and it's all still this same imagery here, it makes you really question everything. It makes you wonder what the hell took 2,000 years for people to figure this out. Like if you like it, people. I appreciate you. If you don't like the info, I'm sorry, but this is the truth and reality. I'm not twisting crap up. Look this stuff up. Do some searching. Don't just sit there and go, no, God's all great. Because he's not. Not this thing. Not this thing. In fact, not any God that anybody has ever spoken about on this planet is actually the creator of all. No. Nobody that in the last few thousand years have ever even made a reference to. It's the creator of all. Appreciate y'all. Enjoy. 5 golden rings.